Well, here we are again, back together in the shed of knowledge. Welcome, 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 my friends. I am John the Storyteller. This is Something Interesting is the name of this channel, and the idea behind it is that I try to tell you something that you don't already know. Could be something from history, something current, something, and you're going to be mad at me, but this is another ship one, But wait, please stay, because I found out something about ships that I've never known, and I doubt very many people are aware of this particular type of ship. And if I were to tell you that there are two main types of ships, sail and steam, you would probably agree. Yeah, I guess they're diesel powered nowadays, but you might agree and say, yeah, there are two types of ships, sail, which gave way to steam. But there is an unknown third type of ship that was first produced in 1925 and it kind of abandoned. And then in 2008, they have picked up the mantle again of this type of ship. This type of ship you could see from a mile away. You would know that there is something very strange about this particular type of ship if it were ever able to sail into your harbor. The ship that I am talking about is something called a rotor ship. This is a ship that is basically propelled by the wind, but with the assistance of a motor, and it's based on a theory called the Magnus effect. And that is when wind hits a spinning cylinder, depending on how fast the cylinder is going, it will create thrust at a right angle to where the wind's coming from. I'm getting ahead of myself here, aren't I? I have a visual aid. Now, let's pretend that this unopened copy of Benny Hill's Golden Chuckles is a ship. On top of that ship, you would either see one of two things. You would see sails catching the wind. That's always kind of caught my fancy. I think that the tall ships are beautiful. But the other type of ship would be something like the Titanic, which would be a ship propelled by steam boilers, triple expansion steam engines in the case of Titanic, but then we also have diesel engines nowadays that propel most of our ships. But this ship is going to have a little weird modification on it, and that is going to be the addition of two, and this may not be to scale, but the idea is that these are towering, huge things, so you almost can consider it to scale. The addition of two, in multiples of two generally, huge cylinders on top. The cylinders, and I'm talking about, these things are enormous, as tall as the mast of a ship, 50 feet tall, 30 feet tall, depending on the ship. These are spun from a motor in the bottom, and the idea behind that is that whenever you think of an aircraft wing, the key to flight is the airflow over that hydrofoil looking thing. You know what I mean? It's like, this is an aircraft wing, the wind flows over it, and that gives it lift. Well, this is a similar principle, except for it's not a hydrofoil style, and the rotation allows you to control which direction you're going. If the wind is coming from the side, you control the rotation of it in such a way that it gives you thrust from this side to push the ship forward. The ship can also immediately, with changing the rotation of it, go backwards. It's really kind of a maneuverable thing when you're out at sea and when you have wind. Now that is kind of the key. If you're dead calm, you're just going to sit there. So in the 2008 ships have been including a propeller motor as well. I think even sailing ships today, you wouldn't go out without a propeller motor. You need something like that, even just to dock. just for those little maneuvers in the dock. But the idea is that the wind is going to hit these rotating cylinders and provide thrust. And a way that you could think about that is if you have a baseball. I don't have a baseball, but I have this. If you have a baseball and a pitcher knows that if he throws it in a certain way, the wind is going to hit it and cause it to, make a curveball or fool the batter in some fashion. And so that is called the Mangus effect. And these are called rotor sails, because in a way they are sails. The thrust is provided not from below, but from the sails themselves. It's a difficult a concept to wrap your head around, but the idea is, if you want to see how it works, if you have a ball in water, like a stream or something, if you spin that ball, it's going to cause the stream of water hitting it to go off in a different direction. That different direction of water, or in this case air, provides thrust, which is what you need to stop it, Vader. My dog is scratching himself. That's why I don't let dogs in here while I'm taping. Good Lord. You want to say hi? All right, come here. This is my dog, Vader. Say hi. Say hi. All right, that was Vader. I included that so that you could have a brief respite from the mind-blowing effect of the Magnus effect. The first ship to employ this was called the Bucknaw, later renamed the Baden-Baden, and it sounds very German because it is. The guy was Flettner. He was a German scientist that adapted the ships for sailing, and that was his ship, Bucknall. So another thing that these can be used for is stabilization of the ship. You can have them, if they stick partly in the water, that the water going around them, you can control them to stabilize the ship. So that is a rotor sail ship or a rotor ship. Now, this theory could also work and was attempted in like 1910 on aircraft. I was just talking about how this is an aircraft, or the idea of thrust with an aircraft. They had aircraft that had these rotating, they had these rotating dealies on them. I mean, I think they did one in 1910 and then didn't do another one until like the 30s because they just were, not that great. Oh, another great thing about a rotor sail ship that was real important. A rotor sail ship can be crewed by one person. Now, I just watched Mutiny on the Bounty, and there was a full crew, and if they didn't have enough people, they couldn't sail that ship. There was a tremendous amount of stuff that needs to be done on a sailing ship. And we're talking about, 1925, sailing ships were not disappeared. We really had switched to steam at that point. But even at that, you need to maintain a crew. But a rotor ship just needed somebody to control how fast and which way the rotors were going, and then you could sail it. By the way, in 1925, the Bucknaw did a transatlantic crossing with these things. Nothing but these things. They crossed the Atlantic. I think it crossed several times. Finally, the Bucknaw was scrapped, and all of these. By the way, this got really popular, and so you're asking me, well, if this is so great, why do we still have diesel ships today? Why aren't ships just with these enormous things sticking up out of them? Well, the answer is we do have some of these today. I'll get to that in a minute. But the real answer is that the vibration that these things caused was so tremendous that it shook the ships apart. They really just vibrated and with the wind and so much that the maintenance was impossible, really, to keep a ship going very long. Now, I mentioned that we have some around today. In 2008, this technology was restored. A big ship called, like the EV1 or something. I know that can't be right. That was that General Motors electric car that they recalled and crushed. Well, that's another story for another time. Something like that. And it's not a true rotor sail ship. It does have giant rotor sails, but it also has a regular engine for propulsion, especially whenever there's no wind. Again, you can be dead calmed in a rotor sail ship if you do not have an additional form of propulsion. Now, the great thing about sailing ships, and it's one of the things that we haven't quite grasped yet, is that a sailing ship is free. I mean, you need a lot of people to run it, but the power is free. There's no diesel fuel on, the Bounty. There's no diesel fuel on the Great East. Oh, wait, there was steam. Okay, well, anyway, you know what I mean. on sailing ships, there was no fuel, there was no steam, there was no coal, all these things that was, or that is so commonly needed for propulsion. We're so used to internal combustion engines and things like that we always assume that there needs to be a source of fuel loaded on board and tanked on board. Not so with the sailing ship. So that was one major advantage of the rotor sail ships. And now the idea is to make a hybrid kind of deal with the rotor sail ships. And even the super, super rich have gotten in on this. Now, if the super rich cash in on it, I don't know what that means, but it means that somebody's willing to spend a chunk of their money on something like this that is arguably not proven technology. I'm thinking of a monster yacht called the Eclipse, and it's just a ridiculous, huge thing with 2 helicopter pads and a disco and 2 swimming pools, and you know what I mean, just like a big ostentatious yacht. But it uses the rotor technology for stabilization on that ship. So that is a ship that is with a yacht. I guess you would call it a boat. I don't really know the definition of a boat versus a ship. What I've heard is that a boat runs on inland waters and a ship runs on ocean waters. That being the case, some of the big ships that plied the Great Lakes would be called boats, if that were the case. And some of them were as big or bigger than ocean-going vessels. But I digress. So anyway, that yacht is called the Eclipse. I don't know if I mentioned that or not. But so that technology is kind of still around. It reminds me of another technology that was brilliant in its inception and difficult to work out in its actual presentation, and that is whenever you attach a set of propellers spinning opposite from each other behind a jet engine aircraft, it causes a thrusting effect that can increase fuel economy by up to 70%. And why, you ask, do we not use that on our jets today? And the answer is the same thing that happened with the rotor sails, is that it shakes the plane apart. It is just unbelievably loud inside a jet with that technology, and it'll just shake it apart. So I guess the point of this particular something interesting is keep thinking. There's ways of incorporating this old technology into new technology to make us all more efficient and have better lives. Ultimately, that's what we're all about, right? Happiness. Happiness is so important when you think about it. That's in that's in the great documents of the United States. Life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, being alive, being free, those are 2 biggies, and then being able to follow your dreams. And that's what America and the rest of the world should be about. So follow your dreams, keep engineering crazy stuff, and I'll talk all about it here on Something Interesting.